Hey everyone, welcome to Celebrity Death Roulette number 12, the Wheel of Misfortune. And as you know, Troy randomly picked 10 names from findadeath.com, the website that I wrote these bios for many years ago. And I don't know who they're going to be, and they'll pop up on the screen, and I get 2 minutes. Sometimes it goes really well, sometimes it doesn't go so well. But the next video is going to be number 13. So if there's somebody that you heard me talk about in the last 11 videos, check them out and leave a comment below. I'm not going to look at the comments. Troy will. And if there's somebody in particular that you're interested in learning more about that I've already talked about, because some people are going, no, we need more time. And that's cool. We can do that. But if there's somebody in particular, leave a comment below about who you might want to hear more about. And that could be fun for number 13. So without delay, I guess we'll start spinning the wheel of misfortune and seeing where it takes us. George Harrison. He was obviously in the Beatles, and he was sort of the... I like George Harrison a lot. I thought he was the best looking of the Beatles personally. I remember that thing at the with Jane Mansfield at the Whiskey A Go-Go, when after their show in '64, when they played the Hollywood Bowl, they wanted to go to the Whiskey, and they wanted to meet Jane Mansfield, and she called the press, and they showed up, and there's that famous picture of George Harrison getting angry at the press at the Whiskey, and that's the one where John Lennon said he peed in her drink. But anyway, so he was of the Beatles. He had a really successful career after the Beatles. Of course, My Sweet Lord was an amazing song. He died actually in Coldwater Canyon in Paul McCartney's house on Heather Street. And when he died, they put a phony address on his death certificate. And I remember Gloria Allred got involved and had it changed, and the next address was changed to Gavin DeBecker's house, who was the security guy to the Stars. But it was fake. It wasn't done right, because Paul McCartney didn't want his house to be turned into some sort of Beatles shrine. But ultimately, legally, they had to put Paul McCartney's address on Heather on George Harrison's death certificate. He was cremated at Hollywood Cemetery. The crematory had been closed down for decades, and they just had recently reopened it. And they had some kind of ceremony at his house. Carrie Fisher told me she was there, but I don't know if that's necessarily true. But she said he died right around the corner from me, and I was there, or something to that effect. But anyway, they reopened the crematory at Hollywood Forever and had George Harrison cremated there, and his ashes are scattered over the Ganges River. I remember I was at a bar in London called the Substation South the night he died, and I remember they played that song at that bar, and it was pretty incredible. You know, it was quite moving, actually. I could have said more about his career. Gregory Peck. Well, everyone knows Gregory Peck mostly because of his voice. I mean, his style, of course, and To Kill a Mockingbird and The Omen, which is a great movie. And I remember doing the Stars Homes tours. And Gregory Peck, I don't think he died yet. And I remember, like, his grandson was out. I mean, this kid had to have been about 8 or 9 at the gates to his house and gave the tour bus the finger, which I thought, oh, that's sweet. Somebody taught him how to do that, to tour buses. I thought that was kind of sucky. And he died. Oh God, my friend Mike, I interviewed him, Mike Steen. He was the mortician at Westwood Cemetery, and Gregory Peck was making arrangements for somebody. I forget who it was, but he spoke to Mike on the phone a couple of times. But I did go to Gregory Peck's funeral at the cathedral downtown, and boy, I remember downtown LA. I'm trying to think of some of the people there. I remember Angelica Houston was there with her husband, because her husband's an architect, and he designed, I think, the archway in that cathedral. Boy, I'm blanking a little bit on Gregory Peck, because I'm getting him confused a little bit with someone else. But it was his voice. To Kill a Mockingbird, of course, Atticus, and he had, oh God, there's so much more to Gregory Peck. funeral. I was there, took pictures. In fact, I didn't know it. We didn't know that but he was actually entombed in the basement, in a crypt in the basement, and nobody knew it was because it happened so quickly. The cathedral had just opened, and we went down to the crypts below the church area, and he was already there, and he was already marked. So they went into high gear to have it prepared for him. And I know there's more to this, and I'm blanking on Gregory Peck of all the people. It's a little embarrassing. Sorry. Please be somebody easy. Nell Carter. Well, Nell Carter, for some reason, I have it in my mind. She reminds me, it's like Don Knotts. I think that she lived like a few doors down from Don Knotts when she died. And she was an actress, a singer. She was big on the stage. I believe she was in, I know she was in Hair. I know she was in the movie Hair. I love that movie. She opened up the Aquarius song at the beginning of Hair. And I want to say she was in The Wiz too. Either she was in the movie or no, Mabel King was in the movie. I'm pretty sure she was in The Wiz on Broadway. And she was on that, oh my God, that TV show. Is it, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the TV show. God. But she had, oh, this is going to be really bad because I'm starting to blank completely on this. She played, I'm totally blanking on this. Nell Carter. I'm going to have to forfeit this one. I really am, because I'm completely blanking on Nell Carter. I know that she was in a really successful sitcom, but it was beyond my sitcom time. So it's not fresh in my mind. You know, it was like I stopped watching television at that point. And I know that she died of cancer. I believe something having to do with Ray Charles too. Ray Charles, and there was a park across the street from, maybe they call it the Nell Carter Park or something like that, in near where Ray, oh God, I'm floundering. It's I'm waiting for this time to go because it's bad. Please, 2, 1. I'm sorry. The sitcoms, I mean, that's like, it's so beyond the time I watch television. Well, we can go on about Liberace for quite some time. In fact, I think it was Liberace's birthday yesterday. He would have been 100 and whatever. But yeah, we had a party, a Liberace party at the shop, I think the last year we were in business. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, everybody showed up in costume, and in fact, I shaved my beard for that. I shaved my beard off, and I walked in, and people didn't even know who I was, dressed like Liberace. But Liberace died here in Palm Springs of AIDS, and there was actually talk he was going to be frozen. I think he was going to have his head frozen or something like that. There's actually proof of that. Like there's documents that he was looking into that. But he died, and they put a different cause of death on his death certificate, and they sent him to Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills, where he was going to be embalmed, I guess, or cremated or whatever he was at the end, because at that point they were handling people with, that died of AIDS in a very different way. And the coroner in Riverside County demanded they bring Liberace back. So they had to drive Liberace's body back to Riverside County to be autopsied again, correcting the cause of death. I think they said it was a heart attack or something, and they changed the death certificate. So there were lawsuits about that. And he's buried at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills with his brother George. The Liberace Museum in Vegas was so cool. And oh God, did you see that video where I knocked over his suit? It was at the Liberace Museum is closed, but they had a display at another museum, and I knocked it over, and that was rather embarrassing. That's in one of the videos that I did. But and also we have a lot of Liberace stuff from his agent Seymour Heller. When Seymour Heller died, all his estate went up for auction, and I actually have the press release that he read talking about Liberace and how he died. And a lot of other stuff, because of personal photographs of Liberace's. That was a treasure trove, that estate sale was, and we got away with like so much stuff for like no money. Oh, Mr. Blackwell? Well, Mr. Blackwell's most famous for being, making the 10 worst dress lists after the Academy Awards. He was a designer, like a really successful designer, like in real life. And I know there's pictures of him with like Jane Mansfield, and he did like golden age of Hollywood people. And at the end of his life, I don't know if he was still designing, but he was certainly not stylish at the end of his life. I used to see him at the Silver Spoon. And one time I talked to him. In fact, there's a hallway at Forest Lawn Glendale in the Freedom Mausoleum that has George Burns and Nat King Cole and Alan Ladd and Clara Bow. And there was the name Blackwell in one of the crypts. And I met him and I said, "Is that your name? Is it your Blackwell? Is that you?" And he said, "Yeah," but it wasn't. He's actually buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. And it has an obelisk in above his grave, which is a really nice grave. I saw him at Shelley Winter's funeral. He was wearing a members only jacket, which is why I say he wasn't very stylish at the end of his life. And the one thing I remember about his funeral, I wasn't there, but Joanne Worley was there. And there's this great picture of her talking at the funeral, and then she has this huge necklace, like this pearl necklace, and she's spinning it around and at his memorial service. So apparently a very well-liked man. He lived in Hancock Park, I know that, and I don't know if his boyfriend or husband or whatever is still alive. I think he died too. But they lived not very far from where we did in Hollywood, but we didn't live in Hancock Park. And but I said he's at Hollywood Cemetery. Vampira is right there by him, and Darren McGavin is very close to Mr. Blackwell. In fact, just in front of him. And I managed to eke some out of that. I'm sorry, Nell Carter. That was hard work. Thelma Todd. Well, Thelma Todd, an actress, but not as well known as an actress as much as the way she died. She was I can only tell you, she was in Marx Brothers movies. In fact, there's a great video, I believe, Groucho and she were filmed in MacArthur Park. I think they were in a canoe or something like that. But she owned a nightclub on Pacific Coast Highway, which didn't burn, actually. It was the Pacific Palisades, Malibu area, and it was very close to being burned and in the fires earlier this year. But it didn't get burned. Anyway, she had this restaurant called Thelma Todd Sidewalk Cafe, which could not have been, you couldn't walk to it. It's PCH, and it's quite a hairy drive, or you couldn't walk to it. Anyway, and then she had this, I guess they say that it was a gangster that wanted to make a casino, a part of her place into a casino, and she didn't want that. And there was talk that she was assassinated by this particular gangster. Now, she lived actually it was on the bottom, on Pacific Coast Highway was where her cafe was, and then behind it was this huge set of stairs and a road, and you go a bit further, maybe 300-400 yards, and there's another set of stairs, and that's where her house was. And she ended up dying of carbon monoxide poisoning in this house. They say she walked from her cafe up to this garage where they found her dead in the garage with the motor running. But the shoes she was wearing didn't have the scuff marks on it that it would have. And it's actually a tough walk. I did a video about her too, and I walked that walk, and it is not an easy walk. And a lot of those roads are washed out nowadays too. It was a good video actually, walking that. But anyway, her death was ruled, I believe it was ruled a suicide. Jimmyi Hendris. It's funny, I was just talking about Jimmyi Hendris today, or writing about Jimmyi Hendris today, because he had a car accident in Benedict Canyon back in the day. And I was just doing some research on Benedict Canyon. Now you guys know that a lot of you know that I'm obsessed with Benedict and all the weird things that have happened in it. And Jimmyi Hendris used to have a nightclub called The Experience on Sunset Boulevard. And Jimmyi Hendrix lived in London at the end of his life. And he was, what was her name? Monica, his girlfriend's name? God, I've been to that house too. I covered these all on findadeath, and he overdosed in her house. But it's not, he had a house on Green Street. Green Street over in Mayfair has a blue plaque on it. It said Jimmyi Hendrix lived here, and so did Handel of Handel Messiah. They had the same house. I think it was next to, Claridge's, down the same street Claridge's hotel was on. But anyway, Monica was her name, I think, that he was at her house, his girlfriend, and overdosed and vomited. And he overdosed, she called the ambulance, and he was in the ambulance, and they had strapped him in the ambulance, and he vomited, and he was in such a way that he choked on his own vomit. I think his death certificate may say inhalation of vomit. And he was pronounced dead at the hospital, and then he was brought back to America, where he's buried in Washington State. His father, it used to be a really modest grave, and his father had this insanely big mausoleum built for him, or outdoor mausoleum. Very nice, but not modest like it was originally. but yeah, he was. I think he was another one that partied up in Laurel Canyon with Cass and Cass Elliot and that whole crew. And there's more to Jimmyi Hendrix. I remember, oh gosh, there was John Phillips. John Phillips, who is like less than a mile from here. He's buried or in a crypt at Forest Lawn in Cathedral City. Of the Mamas and the Papas, of Laurel Canyon fame, was married to Michelle Phillips. He spent time in Cuba or something. There's that whole theory about the people in Laurel Canyon all being, sort of government conspiracy, and all the parents of all the successful musicians were military, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, Frank Zappa, John Phillips. In fact, John Phillips did spend time, I believe in Cuba, and thus communist sort of thinking. I believe it was John Phillips. It was Frank Zappa. I'll be very sad. And he was married to Michelle Phillips, who was famous for not being particularly faithful. Of course, he was pretty screwed up too, and did a lot of drugs, and didn't want Cass in the group of the Mamas and the Papas because he didn't like the way she looked, because she was a big person. She was overweight, and they say that he wouldn't hire her because she didn't have the range that he wanted in the group. And then when he had to hire her because she was just really good. And then they made up a story that she got hit in the head with something, and her octave changed, and she was able to sing for the group. But he's pretty scuzzy in that Mackenzie Phillips has come out with that book saying that she and her father, John Phillips, had a relationship that was physical, and that was quite scandalous too. But John Phillips wasn't going to win any awards for being Father of the Year. He had a liver replacement. I believe he continued drinking after the liver replacement, and his funeral was here at Forest Lawn. I know that at the cathedral. It was not called that at the time. He died here in Palm Springs, at Eisenhower Hospital in Palm Springs, and he was there was Manson. There was a good Manson story. Natalie Schaefer. We love Natalie Schaefer, Mrs. Howell from Gilligan's Island. And she had this odd sort of, she'd been around for a really long time, but it was sort of in the 70s and the late 60s, or in the 60s and 70s, she started, becoming better known. She was it Chinatown that she played the Madam? I think it was Chinatown. But most everyone knows her as Lovey Howell from Gilligan's Island, and she took the job from Gilligan's Island because she wanted to go to Hawaii, and so they made the pilot. And they made the pilot, I believe, when Kennedy was killed, 63, while they were shooting it, because the flags in the background are at half staff when the boat takes off, the SS Minnow takes off. But she took the job, and she didn't want the job. She only wanted to go to Hawaii. But when they went to series, they say that she cried when that happened. I know that she lived on Rodeo Drive and in a really modest little house on Rodeo. In fact, I have pieces of it because they tore it down. And she was good friends with Dawn Wells. I remember that Dawn Wells used to make clothing for people who couldn't change out of their clothes easily, like they were in wheelchairs or they didn't have the mobility. And Natalie Schaefer was her model for that line of clothing that Dawn designed. And she left money. Nobody knew how old she was. I forget. Oh, there was a story about the Planters cheese balls that somebody told me, and I haven't been able to track that story down, but who told me that story? But it had a thing with she had a she had like a double mastectomy, and she had a bathing cap on, and she was swimming, and she got out of the pool, and she had this towel around her, but this scars, and she was eating Planters cheese balls, and it was like, it's terrible. They were like crumbling down. But she left money to her dogs. I know she left a lot of money. I cannot chase down who told me that story. I've tried. Jonathan Brandis. It's funny. I was just watching something I was watching a Richard Thomas interview Jordan did, and he talked about the movie It, and that's how I knew who Jonathan Brandis was. He was a young, I believe he was the young John Ritter in the original miniseries It, with Tim Curry as Pennywise the Clown, which was a great miniseries. And he was also another. I didn't know who this guy was. I mean, I knew that he died early. He had hanged himself outside his apartment in the hallway on a street. I think it was Detroit Street, right off Wilshire Boulevard. And I did a story about him, and people went bananas on finding that. And I was like, I didn't think. I'm not discounting him at all. I didn't know much about him, but people went bananas when he died, like so many people. And they went, oh, you got to see Ladybugs. It's great. I was like, all right. So, Ladybugs was a funny movie where he played a boy that was dressed like a girl to be on an athletic team, I believe. This is in the 80s. But Brandis was obviously very sad. And there was a get-together at his house or his apartment. In fact, I met the lady who lives in his apartment. She let me in there and watch it. It's on YouTube, where I got to walk around the apartment building, and I guess he went out into the hallway and took a belt, and it wasn't like, it was just in the hallway right outside his apartment. And he said, I'll be back in a minute or something, and they didn't see him, and they went out, and there he was. But people, Sequest, I think he was in that show too. I think Roy Scheider was in that. And but yeah, that was like, I guess it must have been a generational thing, because I think he was the first young person for a generation to have died in such an awful way, and it made a big impression on younger generation. Whee. I'm going to wake up at about 4 o'clock this morning, wide awake, being able to give you about 10 minutes on Nell Carter. I feel guilty about that. I really do, because I went blank. But there we are. That's the rules. That's the game. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And I don't know, they're okay otherwise, I think. So anyway, put your suggestions in the comments below, and Troy will be checking out the comments. And maybe for Death Roulette number 13, we will delve into that one. So thank you guys very much for watching. I appreciate it. And don't forget to check out the Patreon page, which you could join up if you don't mind. And a couple bucks a month, but you get all kinds of stuff that a lot of people don't get. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. And until next time.
You heard me.